Absolutely. I just believe that we've got to go back and we've got to put some teeth into this language. I mean, we need some definitions of exactly what is use of force.
That is the reaction 10 Investigates is getting after their latest series, Excessive. Thanks for joining us. I'm 10 Tampa Bay anchor Ryan Bass. Florida Representative Diane Hart says she is now looking to add an amendment to a recently filed criminal justice bill that would better define and track excessive force cases in the state. She says action is needed after seeing the investigation that our team has worked on for the past 6 months as they tried to track the mess that is excessive force data. Their ultimate discovery: finding nobody is tracking complaints in the state or nationally. This was all uncovered as 10 Investigates searched to find out what happens to an officer found guilty of excessive force. The answer? Not much.
Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! Get your hands! Stop resisting! Stop resisting! Okay! Stop! Okay! I didn't do anything!
The officer that clipped me with the car walks past me and kicks me in my face.
On September 22nd, 2016, a teenager tried to run from police after being pulled over in Coral Gables, a suburb outside of Miami.
I was like, bro, the handcuffs are too tight. He's like, I don't give a shut up.
The teen says he was then kicked twice in the face by an officer.
Yeah, he kicked me twice, so he said, is there any cameras? He looked around. Yeah, he looked around.
Who did he ask that to?
The other officer.
But there were more than cameras catching what happened to that young man.
Our officers did not stand for the violence, notified their chain of command right away.
Internal affairs took over.
Once that was done, I made a recommendation to my city manager for termination.
But in the state of Florida, excessive force cases that are found to be sustained don't stop there. While complaints are not tracked by FDLE, sustained cases are turned over to the Criminal Justice Standards Training Commission, or the CJSTC. The CJSTC is made up of 19 members that include law enforcement, from sheriffs to police chiefs to correctional officers. There is also a citizen on the committee that is appointed by the governor. The commission oversees an officer's discipline if an IA investigation sustains a moral character violation, which includes excessive use of force. They decide whether an officer loses their certification, which allows them to work as law enforcement in the state of Florida. So like we mentioned in the case of Coral Gables,
The final order.
while the officer was terminated from his current department, he didn't lose his police certification. Instead, that certificate was put on suspension.
We received notice later on about what the stipulation was.
10 Investigates wanted to know more. We requested data showing every time an excessive force case of an officer was sustained from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and we dug in for 6 months.
Hey, Zach.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And even enlisted the help of our data team at 9 News in Denver.
What do we got?
After weeks of combing through that data, we discovered 1,776 cases of excessive force ruled as sustained since 1985. But what was surprising, of those, only 158 had their certificate revoked. That's right, 158 of 1,776 cases resulted in certificates being revoked. The others were either given a suspension or put on probation.
Come outside now, you're about to get to
Like this one. A former Zephyr Hills officer accused of using excessive force by deploying his taser when it was not needed. Then there was this case in Manatee County, where a deputy struck an inmate with his knee multiple times while the inmate was being held down on the floor.
What message does that send?
It becomes sometimes a difficult decision.
Tommy Ford is the current Bay County Sheriff.
State your full name and the agency you represent.
And the chair of the CJSTC.
You know, I can't speak to prior commissions and what happened then, but I know that the group we have takes it very seriously and certainly realizes the public sentiment on those issues and really works hard to make the right decision.
But I'm comfortable in the fact that what FDLE has put into effect is that anybody that is a CEO like me that wants to hire that individual, if they don't do their due diligence, that's on them.
Chief Hudak says that's because a background check would bring up the officer's history.
Hands on the bar.
But 10 Investigates found some officers disciplined for excessive force continue to work at their current agency
Hands on the bar, man.
or move to other agencies and continue to work.
Come here. He grabbed a hold of me and then threw me up into the fence.
Warren Bunn says what happened to him last October wasn't right.
And I had my handcuffs on. What was I doing? I mean, I wasn't doing it. There was no violent behavior.
His wife filed a complaint with the Citrus County Sheriff's Office claiming the officer on scene used excessive force on her husband.
He hit me in the head with whatever part of his body. He shoved me into the back seat and the back of my head got hit really hardly on the door.
We learned that officer was terminated after an IA investigation.
It's relieving.
But even so, Bunce wonders what will happen next to that officer.
I really believe that there should be. Yeah.
More discipline,
Absolutely.
more action taken against
Yeah.
officers that commit excessive force.
Just more, yeah, they need more training, it sounds like.
And those were the only cases the state knows about. Our team wanted to find out about complaints as well as what agencies have the most in the Bay Area. But as they tried to pull back the curtain on those numbers, they noticed things weren't adding up when it comes to the overall picture of excessive force in the state.
How many years have you been on that commission for?
I believe I've been on the commission now about 6 years.
Charlotte County Sheriff William Prumel is one of the 19 members on the Criminal Justice Standard and Training Commission.
That's not what a law enforcement officer does.
This board decides the fate of an officer if they are found guilty of a moral code violation, including excessive force.
Case number 47021.
FDLE does not track excessive force complaints. They did tell us in an email that they track the sustained cases sent to the commission.
When it comes to excessive force cases, if a case was found sustained, that should be sent to you guys, correct?
Yes.
But 10 Investigates discovered that's not always the case. Take, for example, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. While there were 4 sustained excessive force cases within the department over the past 10 years, we know half of them didn't make it to the state. This man settled with the city for $90,000 of taxpayer money after an excessive force complaint was filed following an incident with him and a deputy. That incident resulting in a plate having to be surgically implanted into his face. That officer was put on leave and re-educated. In 2018, an administrative investigation was launched after a deputy was seen punching an inmate 3 times in the face. According to the report on that excessive force case, the force used was unnecessary given the level of resistance from the inmate. But that case never showed up in any of our documents from the state. We asked why. In an email, the Sarasota Sheriff's Office told us this case was never sent to the state because it only violated our internal policy. But according to this FDLE manual, a moral character code violation is a non-criminal act of conduct, which includes excessive force. When we showed the Sheriff's Office what we found, they sent us an email explaining, since your inquiry, we reached out to FDLE for clarification. We have chosen to update our practice to submit all sustained excessive force cases to FDLE going forward, and then take the case of Daniel Daly.
I idolized him. You know, I mean, he was just a great dad. You know, I mean, he really was.
Greg Daly says a day doesn't go by when he doesn't think about his father, who passed away last year.
He was almost too nice.
So when he got a call letting him know his 84-year-old father was in the hospital after an encounter with an Orlando police officer, he couldn't believe it.
He broke the C3, which is called a hangman's break. That's what snaps when you get hung. It says people don't live when this is broken to the extent this is.
To pick him up and slam him into the ground like he did. It was hard to watch because literally his feet were in the air.
Tim Scott owned the local bar nearby and witnessed the whole thing.
And they just pile drived him right into the ground. It was way too much excessive force.
Daley was later rewarded $900,000 from the city of Orlando for his excessive force complaint, but there was never an internal investigation conducted regarding excessive force, so it's not part of the state statistics.
I'm not sure what constitutes excessive force then. I mean, other than that, I mean, to be brutally slammed to the ground. An old guy, it wasn't some muscle guy. I mean, yeah, it was an old man.
Now, this was all uncovered as we tried to track excessive force complaints at Bay Area departments ourselves. How many were sustained and sent to the state? We found some departments didn't have that information readily available, so it would cost us hundreds of dollars for that answer. Other departments had the info, but like the Sarasota County case, not all agencies were reporting sustained cases to the state. And like the Orlando case of Daniel Daley, his case was never investigated by IA. But Orlando police officials tell us that if this would have happened today, it would have been investigated, which shows us the discrepancy in numbers even just 10 years ago.
To get a really great picture of excessive force complaints, if there needs to be training done, anything, it's just kind of, we don't really have a good picture of it.
No, and I would say we probably don't have a really good standard database that covers all different levels of excessive force.
My name is David, D-A-V-I-D, last name of Thomas, T-H-O-M-A-S. I am a professor of forensic studies here at Florida Gulf Coast University.
Thomas is also a former law enforcement officer of 25 years.
Do we have a good grasp of how many excessive force cases there are or have been in the state of Florida?
Nope, and you never will. Even though there's, let's say, even if we have a universal standard, which we don't, you have to understand that there is an operational side to the way a police department operates.
Thomas says universal standards mean a state statute that defines exactly what excessive force is.
Until they actually decide, FDLE and CJSTC decides, we're going to train everybody the same, all the supervisors, this is going to be the universal thing, and then this is how we expect you to look at it, and this is how we expect you to report it.
The data is not easy to find right now. That's the honest truth. It's not easy to find right now. You just got to hope that your law enforcement leaders are doing the right thing.
And while there's no great statewide database, we learned there should actually be one, not just regarding state cases, but national use of force cases too. 10 Investigates uncovered a law passed 25 years ago to track just that, but it's never been followed.
That me and my friends used to go on the weekends called Ivory. Man, they started yelling at me and saying I was being harassing people, and I said I'm just waiting for my ride home. That's when I stood up, and then the officers basically just rushed me and just started pounding on me, wailing me.
What happened to Jason Dragish is etched in his mind forever. It was also caught on surveillance video inside that club.
I mean, my entire face was just bludgeoned, black eye on both faces, cut on my lip, swollen lip.
10 Investigates discovered FDLE doesn't track complaints. They do track the cases which were decided by the officer's department to show excessive force. The federal government should be tracking these cases too. It is federal law that was passed in 1994, a law that then Senator Joe Biden had a big hand in writing. It's all right here in black and white. Title 42, Section 14142 requires the United States Attorney General to acquire data on the use of excessive force and to report on it annually. We emailed the AG's office for all 25 annual reports. They admitted the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act requires the Attorney General to acquire data about the use of excessive force by law enforcement officers. But they didn't attach any of those reports we requested. Instead, they sent us a link to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, where they say they've made efforts to acquire that data.
Has that ever happened? Have we ever had an annual report?
Not to the spirit of the language of that statute. I mean, the intent there was that every year there would be a report on use of excessive force by police.
That's Matt Hickman, a professor at Seattle University. He used to work at the Bureau of Justice Statistics. He says they attempted to collect data from police departments on citizen complaints about police use of force in 2002, even published it. The author on the report, Matt Hickman.
And is that the last time that was collected then?
That was the first and last time that it was collected and reported. After I left BJS subsequently collected additional waves of complaints data, but they never published them.
Why hasn't it been followed?
To be fair, it's a tough nut to crack. It's challenging. And does that mean we shouldn't do it? No. Does that mean that we shouldn't try? No. But it's never been properly resourced.
10 Investigates reached out to Florida's 2 members of the House of Representatives who are on the Congressional Law Enforcement Caucus, Val Demings and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for months to ask their thoughts about this and if they would push for the law to be followed. Wasserman Schultz never got back to us, and Demings never had time to speak with us.
Congress needs to pass a law saying that this is mandatory, that agencies will report data on the use of force to the federal government. So you need Congress to pass a law. Second, you need to resource it properly.
Some experts say the data collection is critical because it would give agencies a better look at where possible trends lie, possible training that could be implemented.
Get on the ground! Resisting! Get your hands! Stop resisting!
I remember being on the ground saying, you guys got this wrong.
This data would also provide transparency, helping to build relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve.
I think there should be a database, if not statewide, nationwide.
Many say better tracking would mean better training. That's why Representative Diane Hart was surprised to see our report. She spoke with 10 Investigates and had thought that the law that the legislature just passed would fix this problem, but now says that's not enough. The statute currently only requires use of force cases that cause death or serious bodily injury to be tracked, leaving it up to the departments to determine what serious actually is. That has her now looking into redefining that law.
I'm glad you brought it to my attention. I mean, sitting there when you're debating these bills and you're trying to get language passed, a lot of stuff gets past you because you talk about it and then you assume it's there. And you don't have time, plenty of times, to go back to read every single line because things are moving so quickly. And you're grateful to be able to get a bill passed with some information in it. So I think we slipped.
You need to take it a step further.
I absolutely believe we need to go a little bit further.
And while Representative Hart gets to work on a better tracking system that experts say could lead to better training, some agencies, they aren't waiting around. They've already invested in new types of training to get use of force statistics in the state down.
Instead of just put the knife down, it's, why don't you just tell me what's going on?
It's a classroom that would be filled with law enforcement officers.
Cover and distance, cover and distance.
From the Tampa Police Department.
This is a constantly evolving process that they're going through.
But today,
what can we do to diffuse things?
The students are our 10 Investigates producer and me.
We need to recognize when, if we're barking the same order over and over and over again and we're not getting a response, when do we need to shift gears?
Learning all about new training used by Tampa Police.
ICAT training is a way of approaching and dealing with persons in crisis.
The training put in place by then Chief of Police Brian Dugan and Mayor Jane Castor.
Hands up! No show!
After weeks of protest in the cities and across the nation sparked by the murder of George Floyd.
I think that especially in this day and age, the need for this type of response and this type of training is very important. I think that the mayor and the chief recognized that trying to standardize this, along with a lot of other agencies, was a positive.
According to its website, ICAT is a training program that provides first responding police officers with the tools, skills, and options they need to successfully and safely defuse a range of critical incidents. According to the site, 7 agencies in Florida have added this type of training to their curriculum. Tampa Police being the first one in the Tampa Bay area.
Can they compose themselves or keep themselves composed even when you're tap dancing on that last nerve?
The training takes officers from the classroom to potential real-life scenarios.
I bet you it would go up and fire really good.
Calm down, just calm down and talk about what's happening.
Which we also took part in.
Come on, shoot me. No, sir. Shoot me. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to talk.
Teaching participants how to handle a situation where use of force may not always be necessary.
We need to focus on getting the baby out of here right now.
We know that 1,776 officers have been found guilty of using force when not necessary in the state. That's according to state data. But in 6 months, 10 investigates found some agencies not reporting sustained cases to the state, which means ultimately the number are higher than what's documented.
There's things that we've been using maybe under some different terminology or just approaching it from a slightly different angle for years. So it wasn't a dramatic shift for us, which was positive, I think, in a lot of ways. But this just packaged it in a way that if it made officers buy into it or understand it a little bit better. Good.
Jared Dowds, who trains the officers, says some officers have already taken what they've learned and use it out in the field, which he calls a win.
What can we do to help him? We're not just here to enforce the laws. He really legitimately may need some help.
This is something that helps all the officers to look at other options. If there's one situation that gets resolved better as a result, doesn't that work out better for everybody?
And it's not just Tampa Police. Other agencies are looking into adding this type of training to their toolbox as well. For an even deeper look into some of the excessive force cases that our team has uncovered, you can find it all right now at 10tampabay.com/10investigates.